Precambrian rock. It's supposed to be 1.4 billion years old. What is it doing on top of Chief Mountain in Glacier National Park at 9,000 feet? Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And your co-host Rich Gear here as well.
We're going to be talking about Glacier National Park, which we visited, 25 years ago.
2001, so 25 years ago. Yeah, that's amazing.
And it was quite the experience. We had 26 people on that trip. Remember that, Rich?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Wasn't that what we had? Who was it? Oh, yeah, out there in Glacier, we had the Ice Age guy.
Michael Lord.
Yeah, Michael Lord was out there with us, showing us around, and we had quite the group out there. Yeah, your daughter and they were hiking up. They did a lot of hiking up there in those days, and yeah, it was quite something. You know.
Yeah, I've just found a whole collection of pictures from that trip, and I may be able to use them in this video. But the interest from a creationist standpoint of this park is that the rocks in the park are upside down. The top layer is Precambrian, and the basement rocks underneath it are Cretaceous, which is supposed to be the age of the dinosaurs. But Precambrian is supposed to be the time before life started to evolve, according to the traditional evolutionist arguments. And so I think that we have a big problem that evolutionists need to explain. They haven't really explained it very well. They talk about overthrust. And so they say that, it's a thrust fault and it's something that it got a whole block of strata got shoved up and then shoved over about 50 miles. Now, this is a area that is 300 miles wide and 50 miles across. So it had to have moved 50 miles. Now, I think it takes a lot of faith to move mountains, and in this case,
Well, Jesus, that's his own word. But he said if you had the faith of mustard seed, you can move this mountain. But evolutionists seem to have a lot more faith than that. They seem to have the ability to move. Tons of Precambrian rock over Cretaceous rock, and there's absolutely what's I think is fascinating is it's is the contact line between the two layers. It's like a knife edge, according to some of the earlier research. This is an old creationist argument it's been going on really in the 1960s with Clifford Burdick and Henry Morris used it in the Genesis flood. I remember reading about this years ago when I first started looking into this stuff, and this Lewis overthrust is a real big problem. And Doug, why is that a problem? Because there's like if there's an overthrust or an upthrust and then an overthrust, you have to move the rock has to be pushed upward and then moved across a whole 50 miles and leaving virtually no evidence of the intervening rock strata because according to the uniformitarian geologic column, if you will, there should be Ordovician and Silurian and Devonian, the Pennsylvanian, Mississippian, all these rock strata before the age of the dinosaurs, which begins in the Triassic and Jurassic. We don't have that, all the way to the Cretaceous. And they say, well, it must have ground it down. But Doug, there's problems with that, as your notes have said, and we've talked about this many times in the past. But there's no evidence of erosion. There are things we talk, and I'll have you explain what these are. But the evidence would be slickensides, fault gouge, breccia, and rubble resulting from the movement. Now, rubble from the movement, okay, there's nothing there. But what is breccia and what is fault gouge and what is slickensides, Doug?
well, breccia is sort of sharp angled the pieces of rock that
Okay.
would have broken off during the movement. Now, slickensides would be scraping marks. where the one rock slid over the top of the other
Okay.
mark, and it sort of polished it slick. And fault gouge would be finely ground up materials, rocks. And so breccia and rubble, all those things indicate movement. But many years ago, I got this. I was out in San Diego. I was in the Navy in San Diego, and I was
Yeah.
working with Creation Science Research Center, which is a very early creationist organization. And it was just down the street from where I lived out in San Diego. And so I got talking to these guys, and they gave me this old film strip, which use a film strip projector, and you feed it through the. It's sort of like slides, only you feed it through a little sprocket mechanism,
I
and
remember that presentation. I remember, and of course, I definitely remember film strips as well. That's a old technology, but Doug, that shows you how old this idea is. And to me, evolutionists have never really had a good explanation for this that I've ever
well,
read.
the problem doesn't go away with age, you know. And
Yeah,
so here's I think Walter Lammerts, he was one of the early members of the Creation Research Society who was quite active, and he had a whole list of places that he knew of in the world from references that documented the out of order strata. And this one in particular is quite problematic for evolutionists because of the size of it. You say, there's the several mountains that are sitting out there. Chief Mountain in particular is the most prominent. It sort of shows the furthermost east that the thrust would have gone, where the top layer is Precambrian, and the bottom layer is showing at the base of the mountain as Cretaceous. And
okay.
so it was interesting. I just looked it up in Wikipedia, and they just stated that as a matter of fact without trying to explain it. And so apparently, all you have to do is give it a name, overthrust, and it's something that happens when you have plate tectonics. And so when you get these two plates coming together, they just slide over the top of each other, and it's a kind of a mess, but that's the way it is, and so that's their explanation. And I we've talked about the thrust fault in Nevada, where the Red Rock Canyon and the Valley of Fire
Yeah.
in the same out of order sequence, Cambrian, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian, in both places, and yet they are 75 miles apart, and you have to explain how uh, that was all done with the. It really looks like it's all laid down that way by water action, and
No,
especially.
Doug, I think it might be a good time. What does a lot of people may not understand. I mean, people who listen to our shows for over the years would know this. People who are familiar with it, but what does this have to do with really evolution? The layers of the rock. It's mainly because uh, you need a lot of time because no one's ever seen macro type evolutionary processes ever happen. So they need endless eons, geologic ages of time, but we're telling you with the Chief Mountain and with the Lewis overthrust, you don't have any of this missing. The missing sequences are all gone. They're not there. They're not
Mhm.
only they're not only out of order, but they're actually you have all these layers that are missing. They're not even there with no evidence that they were ever there, that there was anything ever there. The other thing, Doug, is that, and I used to be confused about this a long time ago when I first getting into this, is what makes a layer different. And we've talked about this before in the show, but I think it's good to reprise the issue for those who maybe have never heard it. The layers are determined by what kinds of fossils are in them. Okay, primarily. And
Mhm.
of course, then they will correspond to other layers. They'll sandwich them together like a deck of cards from one part of the earth to another part. But there's maybe a couple spots in the entire world where supposedly the entire geologic column is to be found. It's really not found anywhere. And they just kind of put things together based on the fossil evidence they had there. But we're saying that in the Precambrian, I believe Cretaceous primarily would be more or less the base rock or the rock that was there before the flood. Okay, and is
Either
that
that
correct?
or it's when it was laid down, it just didn't have any fossils in it. They
Yeah.
came from
Either way
a
you get
different
it.
direction that covered the Cretaceous rock. And
Anyway, it's not
so,
older. We're saying we're believing that these layers were laid down at the same time during a worldwide flood, where the other ones have to have 1.5 billion years, and then Cretaceous is about 110 million years. So there's all these, 1.5 to 110 million. All that rock sequence is missing. All those layers of fossils and things you're supposed to see are not there.
so
Correct?
if that was actually laid down all at once and then that block was shoved up, it means that all those layers that are missing were up at the top of the Precambrian rock and were eroded away.
Well, or yeah, or well, the camera rock was on top of it, and it pushed it out of the way. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. It's to me, it's an argument from absence of evidence. There's no evidence that these missing layers were ever there, and consequently the missing eons of time or eras of it they don't exist either. The Triassic, Jurassic, the Permian, the Devonian, Ordovician, Silurian, all these layers, all these fossiliferous layers, never were here. They were not there to begin with, and there's no evidence. As we said earlier, um, the slickensides and breccia and everything else, the rubble, that's not there, and the edges and the contact point are it's like a knife edge, correct?
Right. When we saw that old film strip, they showed documented where they went to I think five different places along where the contact
Okay.
line is. They went to Two Medicine Campground where we went to Trick Falls. You remember that? Uh,
I'm trying to remember. What was that?
Trick Falls is where the water was coming out of a cave.
Oh,
But
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but if there's a high water level, it flows over the top as well. And
That's
so
right. Yep,
you
I
have
remember
two
that.
different sizes of waterfall, and so it's called Running Eagle Falls, but
Okay.
the people call it Trick Falls because of this. Uh, it's different, because it comes out of a cave.
Comes out of a cave or of a. Now, Doug, right now, the picture behind you is actually we would be standing right on the overthrust, right there, sit right on where the
Pretty
overthrust is
near
at.
it. This is St. Mary's Lake, and it's looking towards uh, the mountains in the background, which is Precambrian, and it's actually looking probably close to where Triple Divide Peak is.
Okay.
Triple Divide Peak is the spot where the water flows on one side to the Pacific Ocean, on the other side is to the Atlantic Ocean. In the
Oh, it's
third,
continental divide then, huh?
it's a divide, and the third divide is where it flows up into the Arctic.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, interesting. I
So
did not know.
it's that part is where the water just flows into the Mackenzie River or actually, I think it goes into Lake Winnipeg eventually. But
Okay.
it's a pretty interesting spot, and the people have climbed the Triple Divide Peak and uh, taken the water from one stream and went over to the other side of the mountain, poured it into the.
That's
We
funny.
changed the course of history here, the
Yeah.
course of the where that water is going. So that's kind of a neat thing you can do there. But there's also another mountain called Divide Mountain, which you can see at the end of the end of St. Mary's Lake as it sort of flattens out into the plain that where the Crow Indians and the Blackfoot Indians have their reservation. There's a road that we took that goes through the park. It's called Going to the Sun Road. I remember we went up to Waterton National Park up in Canada. We took the road up there,
Right.
and as you were driving, it's 52 miles across that, but you take it about 25 miles an hour because it's sort of a treacherous road. And I remember I was sick, and so you were driving going back, and I was.
I got you sicker, didn't I?
Oh yeah, you were booking, and I was a little bit nervous.
We're still here though, folks, so we're okay.
It was interesting that we decided that what we would do is to divide up into different groups and to explore, just explore on our own. So that was our exploration. I remember also I was wanted to get something to for the cold I caught after our water rafting trip, and
Oh, yeah.
and I got a picture of us going over Bone Crusher rapids, and that was all kinds of fun for everybody, but everybody got soaked. And so the next day, I think I caught the cold, and up in Waterton Park, I asked them if they had something for a cold, and the guy up there said, gave me a bottle of stuff, and he says this will knock it out. It's called Buckley's uh, cough syrup. Well,
Okay.
that stuff will kill you to death, but it knocked out the cold.
And I remember going along with Michael Ord taking us to the back trail, kind of the hiking thing, trying to find contact points and things like that. And it was quite a wild trip. It was a little rough on us, you know. A little, Michael Ord he was a trooper, man. He really likes to go in the backwater,
Yeah,
you know.
I was a little bit worried about that because we were at Trick Falls, and he had a, spot that where he knew where the contact was,
Yes.
but it was way back in there.
To get there,
Had
yeah.
to blaze a trail, and of course it was starting to get a little bit dusk and dark, and I was a little bit wondering if we'd encounter bears or any kind of wildlife, and so I made it part of the way, and then I backtracked, and the underbrush was just a little bit too much, and so got myself out of there. But it was maybe 45 minutes later that the last of the troop got out of there, and we were able to proceed back home. But he was also explaining where he went up to Maria's Pass, which is where you could see the contact. And that's on US 2, is just on the southern border of the park. Yeah, but he said that it's a pretty precarious hike up to where the contact is. And so, yeah, you have to be a little bit crazy and in shape in order to do this trip and explore it. I think my daughter Linda and her friend Steve Newman, uh, they took the trip along the ridge that goes along to the glacier,
Yes, they did.
and they have some fantastic pictures of that. I think it's the Grinnell Glacier is what it's called, but
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
but I
I think
guess
you're right.
that along the path they counted a mountain goat coming in the opposite direction. They approached the goat. The goats were looking this way and that way. Instead of trying to pass them, it climbed up the rocks above them, and so they were able to get by him. And
Yep.
then he climbed back down on the path. But
This argument has held its own. You have this huge amount. How many tons of rock, Doug? You remember the Precambrian rock is it's just 300 tons of rock or
like 12 trillion tons of rock or
12 trillion
something.
tons of rock moving across. Cretaceous, which is sedimentary rock, with no evidence of movement. And I'm going, this is really just to me an anomaly unless you accept the fact that the biblical record about a worldwide flood is a correct one, because
Yeah.
these things could have been laid down when the rock was not rock. See, when you got 1.5 trillion or a billion years and then 110 million years, they've all been solidified for centuries, for millennia, for thousands and millions of years. So there should have been evidence of movement. But if it was plastic, in other words, soft, like strata during a worldwide flood, there would have been no evidence of it, you know. And as you said, it was either the basement rock, it was kind of come up, or areas that didn't have any life in it. But either way you get it, there's no real fossil record in the Precambrian rock, and you had dinosaurs in the Cretaceous rock, which would have been like Triceratops or T-Rex. I'm not, or hadrosaurs. I'm not sure what particular dinosaur bones they found in the Cretaceous rock there, but those would have been the kind of but they're dinosaurs. Okay.
Yeah, they're actually on the eastern side of the park. I think there's a dinosaur fossil museum. Yeah, I guess that the dinosaur fossils are quite predominant in that layer. Apparently, there are a small handful of creationists who uh, argue for overthrusts. And they say, well, with plate tectonics, you're going to have some of this strata mix up anyway, because you have the continents crashing into each other
Yep.
and moving over the top. And so I think in that case, it's still a good argument that, it's not following what you would expect with millions of years of evolution with just sand grains falling down in a shallow sea, like what they want you to believe. And so the argument for the millions of years sort of folds up on this case. Now, we need
Disappears
to,
like the missing rock strata, Doug.
yeah,
I think the argument disappears just like the rock strata. Yeah, even with the long age people and the uniformitarian geologists, most of them believe that these sediments were laid down by water action, but in all these eons of time separating them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
They, I mean, the fossils, like you say, the shallow seas, and creature falls to the bottom of it, and sediments slowly come over it. But you and I know fossils don't occur that way. At least we know from what we see in the evidential record in the modern case. When you have something fall in the bottom of a shallow sea, scavengers chew it apart and disarticulate all the skeleton, the bones, and they generally dissolve and fall apart unless they're buried rapidly by hundreds of tons of by tons of sediment very quickly. And what would cause something of that magnitude? These fossil graveyards, for instance, which are all over the place, what would cause that, except again sediments being churned up by water action? What is the old famous thing that Ken Ham likes to say? If you got a worldwide flood, what would you expect to see? Billions of dead things laid down in rock layers by water action all over the earth. And what do you find? Billions of dead things laid down by water action in rock layers all over the earth. That's what you find. I know it's a little bit of a glib thing, but the reality is that's exactly, you don't find that with slowly mounting sediments. Stuff gets scavenged, destroyed, rotted. You don't get fossilization at all. It has to be quickly buried. And so what you have to propose is a number of catastrophic scenarios rather than one, because you can't, except for a few minor things after we believe the worldwide flood, you virtually have no fossilization at all. You might have a couple things like with volcanic, like Pompeii, or a few things like that. But again, it's catastrophic processes. But this is worldwide. We see this phenomenon, okay, where fossils are everywhere. So, and then again, the Precambrian rock, there's no fossils, you know.
I had a book I bought in the park. It's called Rocks, Ice, and Water, and it talked about the possible scenarios that the evolutionists proposed for the overthrust, and The one that seemed to be the most popular was that it slid down a slope. So,
Oh,
so
okay.
the question is, well, then how did it get way up
Yeah.
10,000 feet and then slide down the slope? And it's the Earth forces and mechanisms to actually pull that off just doesn't seem to be there. And if you have 12 trillion tons of rock that just doesn't tend to move, uh,
No, and if it moved at all, it would seem like it would destroy its own self by the force needed to move it would actually cause it to crumble and destroy
exactly.
itself. Yeah, I mean it's insurmountable odds to me. Or it just the only reason why they get away with this is because the evolutionary scenario is the dominant paradigm. People don't want to believe there's a God who judges the earth, and
Yeah.
he does, and he did.
And it's interesting, the Wikipedia article I just looked at said that Precambrian layer was 1.4 to 1.5 billion years old. And then the question is, well, where did they come up with that age? And people would say, well, don't they radioisotope date it?
Uh,
And they don't realize you can't do that to sedimentary rock.
no.
And you have to find a little piece of particle to date, and it really isn't something that lends itself well to radioisotope dating. You need igneous rocks in order to do it. Now, there's apparently some dikes that come up, but which are intrusions that come from volcanoes. But
Yeah, volcanic intrusions into the sedimentary rock. That's
uh,
how they do some of it. But by and large, Doug, they date the rock by the fossils that are in it, don't they?
exactly, yeah. And so it's a circular reason. They date the fossils by the rocks, they date the rocks by the fossils. And
Yeah, because
so it
they have
is,
an a priori assumption that before radiometric dating even was a factor, they already had these rock layers. I read a book called The Devonian Controversy way back. It was written in 1807 or something like that. I had this book. I'm not sure where it is, but 1807 was like 100 years before radiometric, maybe 150 years before radiometric dating ever was a factor. So they already had an a priori prejudice that causing slow accumulations of rock over centuries and millennia and eons of time. So, that is to me a bait and switch argument, but the reality is, you cannot date sedimentary rock. Now, Doug, can you date metamorphic rock by radiometric processes? I've never been able to have an answer to that.
I don't think so. I don't think it lends itself well to
It's
that.
probably like sedimentary rock, similar to the
Right.
properties of that. Yeah, the only one you can really date
You
is
can't
igneous
really
rock.
date marble. Now, what's interesting is if you use carbon-14 dating on
Ah,
limestone, well, then you get to a young age, and that that doesn't help the evolutionists at all.
at all,
And
no.
so that's a real problem. You know, our trip that we took, we stayed at a place called Abbott Valley, and it's a converted sawmill. And there's some log cabins and a few other places that we rented, and it was really a fabulous trip. This was on the western part of near West Glacier, in a place called Martin City, and so that was really a wonderful place to stay. Now, my cuckoo clock tells us that we're out of time,
We're out of time, Doug. This was a good
so
show, Doug. Thanks. This was good, very interesting subject to
we hope
revisit.
that you enjoyed our show tonight on Glacier National Park. We'll see you next time.